I was hidden behind a decorative curtain at my sister's wedding reception. Everyone acted like I didn't exist. Then a stranger approached and whispered, "Play along and pretend you're here with me." When he stood to make an announcement, the entire room fell silent and my sister's smile vanished. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to that crisp autumn morning in September when everything changed. The invitation arrived on a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays were my late shift days at Sweet Haven Bakery in Portland, Oregon, where I'd been working as head pastry chef for the past 3 years. My studio apartment in the Pearl District wasn't much, just 600 square feet with barely enough counter space for my weekend baking experiments, but it was mine. I'd earned it through early mornings and late nights, through burned fingertips and countless failed recipes that eventually became successes. That particular Thursday, I'd been up since 3:30 a.m. perfecting a new recipe, brown butter chai croissants with cardamom cream. By the time I stumbled through my door at 2 p.m., exhausted and smelling of cinnamon, I almost overlooked the thick ivory envelope nestled between credit card offers and grocery coupons. The return address made my stomach drop. Isabel Montgomery. My older sister by 4 years. The golden child who could do no wrong. The daughter who made our mother's eyes light up at every mention. The sister who had slowly edited me out of her life like an unwanted photograph. Inside, the invitation was everything I expected from Isabel. Traditional, elegant, expensive. Cream-colored cardstock with raised gold lettering announced her marriage to someone named Preston Whitmore III. A name that sounded like old money and country clubs, which made perfect sense for Isabel. The wedding was scheduled for mid-November at the Crystal Ridge Resort in Lake Oswego, one of the most exclusive venues in the Portland area. I should have felt happy. Excited, even. Your sister only gets married once. At least that's what people say. But as I held that perfectly crafted invitation, my mind traveled back to our last real conversation 8 months earlier. It had been Christmas Eve at our mother's house in West Lynn. I'd spent 3 full days creating an elaborate gingerbread centerpiece, a by-D Victorian house complete with spun sugar windows and hand-piped royal icing details. I'd worked until 2 a.m. for 3 consecutive nights, determined to contribute something special to the family celebration. Isabel had arrived empty-handed, her arms laden only with designer shopping bags containing gifts wrapped by the store. "Oh, Amanda," my mother had said, barely glancing at my gingerbread masterpiece before relegating it to the kitchen counter, far from the main dining table. "You really shouldn't go to such lengths. It's too much. Look at how simple and elegant Isabel keeps things. That's real class, knowing when less is more." The gingerbread house sat in the kitchen, admired only by the catering staff my mother had hired. Isabel's store-bought desserts, generic cookies on a silver platter, took center stage on the dining table. That was our dynamic. I could bring the moon wrapped in stardust, and it would be too much, too trying, too Amanda. Isabel could show up with nothing, and it would be elegant, sophisticated. So Isabel, tucked inside the wedding invitation was a small note card in Isabel's perfect calligraphy. "Amanda, I know our paths have diverged, but you're still my sister. It would mean the world to have you there. Please say you'll come." I called her that evening. She answered on the 6th ring, distracted. "Isabel, I got your invitation. Congratulations." "Oh, good. I was worried the postal service might have messed up." "You're coming, right?" "Of course. Tell me about Preston. How did you meet?" There was a pause, just a beat too long. "At a healthcare management conference in Seattle. He's the VP of operations at Cascade Medical Group. Very accomplished. Very respected. Mother thinks he's absolutely perfect." Of course she did. I wondered if Isabel loved him for who he was or for how he looked on paper, how he sounded when she introduced him at parties. "I'm really happy for you," I said, trying to inject genuine warmth into my voice. "Thank you. I appreciate that. Listen, I have to run. Meeting with the florist in 15 minutes. This wedding is consuming my entire life. I'll send you more details soon, okay?" She ended the call before I could respond. I stared at my phone, that familiar hollowness settling in my chest. Not quite sadness. Not quite anger. Just the dull, persistent ache of being perpetually second best. The weeks leading up to the wedding dissolved into a haze of 16-hour workdays and anxious preparation. November was always busy at the bakery. Thanksgiving orders and early Christmas requests kept us running constantly. But I managed to carve out time to find a dress, a soft, dove-gray silk that complemented my complexion without being too bold or attention-grabbing. I arranged for the time off, despite my boss Marcus's complaints about losing me during our busiest season. I should have known something was wrong when Isabel didn't ask me to be a bridesmaid. She had 7 bridesmaids. I counted them on her Instagram posts. College sorority sisters, work colleagues, even our second cousin Stephanie, whom Isabel had openly mocked at family gatherings for years. When I finally gathered the courage to ask, her response was clinical. "The wedding party was finalized months ago, Amanda. These are people I see every day. People who are part of my current life. You understand, right?" I understood perfectly. I understood that our shared childhood, the matching Halloween costumes, the secret backyard fort, the whispered conversations in the dark, meant nothing compared to her carefully curated adult social circle. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in mid-November at Crystal Ridge Resort, about 30 minutes outside Portland. The forecast predicted clear skies and temperatures in the low 50s, perfect fall wedding weather. I drove there alone, my dress hanging carefully in the back seat, a wrapped gift on the passenger seat. I'd agonized for weeks over what to buy them, finally settling on a handcrafted wooden serving board from a local artisan, inlaid with Oregon black walnut and maple. Something meaningful, something that showed I cared. Crystal Ridge was breathtaking. The venue sat atop a hill overlooking a pristine lake, surrounded by evergreens and manicured gardens. The ceremony site featured a glass-walled pavilion with panoramic views, and white roses seemed to bloom from every conceivable surface. Isabel had clearly spared no expense, which meant our mother had spared no expense. This was the wedding she'd dreamed of for decades, the perfect celebration for her perfect daughter's perfect life. I arrived 3 hours early, hoping to see Isabel, maybe offer help or just moral support. Instead, I walked into controlled chaos. The bridal suite overflowed with laughing women in matching champagne robes, Prosecco glasses in hand, while a photographer documented every moment. Music played, makeup brushes flew, and the air smelled of hairspray and expensive perfume. I knocked softly on the half-open door. Isabel glanced up from where she sat in the makeup chair, her eyes meeting mine for a fraction of a second before sliding away. "Amanda, you're really early. I thought maybe I could help with last-minute things. Everything's completely under control. The coordinator has it all handled. Why don't you find your seat? The ceremony starts at 4. One of the bridesmaids, a willowy blonde I didn't recognize, whispered something to the woman beside her. They both looked at me with those tight, polite smiles that really mean please leave now. I backed out, my cheeks burning. I shouldn't have assumed I'd be welcome in that inner sanctum. I should have known better. Outside, venue staff rushed around making final adjustments to what was already perfection. I wandered toward the ceremony area, searching for my place card among the rows of white chairs. The seating area was arranged in a semicircle facing the glass pavilion where Isabel and Preston would exchange vows. The first 3 rows were clearly reserved for immediate family and VIPs. Small reserved signs marked each section. I expected to find my name somewhere in the 2nd or 3rd row. Close enough to matter, far enough to acknowledge I wasn't part of Isabel's inner circle. I found my name in the very last row, tucked in a corner behind a large decorative curtain that framed the ceremony space. From that seat, I'd have an almost completely obstructed view of the ceremony. I'd barely be able to see my sister's face as she got married. I stood there, holding that little place card with my name in elegant script, and something inside me fractured. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. This was Isabel's way of putting me exactly where she thought I belonged. Out of sight, out of mind, barely acknowledged. I could have left. Should have left. I could have driven back to Portland, called in with food poisoning, and spent the evening on my couch with ice cream and reality TV. But stubbornness, or maybe pride, or maybe just the desperate hope that I mattered, kept me there. Guests began arriving around 3:30. I watched from my hidden corner as people found their seats, embraced warmly, posed for photos against the stunning backdrop. I recognized faces from family gatherings, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in years. None of them noticed me in my corner. Why would they? I was exactly where I was supposed to be, invisible. Our mother arrived at 3:40, resplendent in a floor-length champagne gown that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. She was escorted to the front row by a groomsman, beaming and graciously accepting congratulations from everyone she passed. She didn't look back, didn't scan the crowd for her younger daughter. In her world, I was already accounted for, already categorized and dismissed. The ceremony began precisely at 4 p.m. String music swelled from hidden speakers, and the wedding party began their processional. Each bridesmaid floated down the aisle in matching dusty rose gowns, carrying bouquets of white ranunculus and eucalyptus. The groomsmen followed in charcoal gray suits. Then came an adorable flower girl and ring bearer, Preston's niece and nephew, I learned later. Finally, Isabel appeared on our father's arm. Even from my obstructed view, I could see she was stunning. Her gown was a masterpiece of French lace and silk, her veil cascading behind her like a waterfall. Our father, who I'd barely spoken to since my parents' divorce 7 years earlier, looked distinguished in his custom tuxedo, his expression proud. I craned my neck around the curtain, trying to see better. The angle was terrible. I caught maybe 30% of the ceremony, mostly the backs of heads and occasional glimpses of the officiant. That's when I realized I wasn't alone behind the curtain. A man sat 3 seats away, also partially hidden by the fabric. He looked to be in his early 30s, wearing an impeccably tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. His dark hair was styled in that effortlessly perfect way that actually takes significant effort, and he had the kind of sharp, handsome features you'd see in a luxury watch advertisement. But what struck me most was his expression. He looked as uncomfortable and out of place as I felt. He caught me looking and offered a small, sympathetic smile. I smiled back weakly before turning my attention back to the ceremony, or what little I could see of it. The officiant spoke about love, commitment, partnership. Isabel and Preston exchanged vows I couldn't quite hear. They exchanged rings to enthusiastic applause. And just like that, my sister was married. The ceremony lasted maybe 30 minutes, but felt both endless and far too brief. As guests stood and began moving toward the cocktail hour, the stranger from my row approached. Up close, he was even more striking, intelligent steel-gray eyes that seemed to perceive everything. Quite a view, wasn't it? His voice carried warm amusement. Spectacular, I replied dryly. I particularly enjoyed the back of that gentleman's head in row 12. Very photogenic, he laughed, a genuine sound that loosened something tight in my chest. I'm Cameron, and I'm guessing from your premium seating assignment that you're either someone's least favorite relative or you mortally offended the wedding coordinator. Amanda. And I'm actually the bride's sister. His eyebrows shot up. Her sister? And they seated you back here? Apparently I don't fit the aesthetic. Cameron studied me with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. Well, that's their profound loss. The cocktail hour is about to start, and I have a feeling it's going to be just as awkward as the ceremony. What do you say we face it together? You don't have to pity me. It's not pity, it's strategic alliance. I'm here as a +1 for my business partner who got the flu last week, which means I know exactly 2 people at this wedding, and they're the couple who just got married and will never remember I exist. So really, you'd be doing me a favor. There was something genuine in his offer, something that made me want to accept despite my wounded pride. Before I could respond, he extended his arm in an old-fashioned gesture. Shall we? I hesitated for only a heartbeat before linking my arm through his. Together, we walked toward the cocktail hour, and for the first time since arriving, I didn't feel completely alone. The cocktail hour was held in an elegant pavilion with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Round tables draped in ivory linens were scattered throughout, each adorned with towering floral arrangements. A full bar dominated one wall, and servers in crisp black uniforms circulated with trays of appetizers that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Almost. As a pastry chef, I had strong opinions about food as art, and whoever had catered this event clearly knew their craft. The attention to detail was impressive. Cameron stayed close as we navigated the crowd. People clustered in small groups, conversations buzzing with the pleasant energy that comes with free-flowing champagne and wedding celebration euphoria. Several guests glanced our way with curiosity, probably wondering who the handsome stranger was and why he'd attached himself to the bride's invisible sister. We found a quiet table near the windows. Cameron returned from the bar with 2 glasses of champagne and a small plate of appetizers he'd somehow convinced a server to compile for us. "So," he said, settling into the chair beside me, "tell me about your sister. What's Isabel like when she's not starring in the wedding of the century?" I took a sip of champagne, considering how to answer. The truth felt too raw, too revealing. But something about Cameron's steady, patient gaze made me want to be honest. Isabel is perfect. Or at least, she works very hard to appear perfect. Perfect grades, perfect career, perfect relationships, perfect life. She's the daughter every parent dreams of having. And you're not? I'm the daughter who became a pastry chef instead of a doctor or lawyer or corporate executive. Who lives in a studio apartment instead of a house in the suburbs? Who's single at 30 instead of married with a 5-year plan? I'm the disappointment, the one who didn't follow the approved script. Cameron selected a crab cake from the plate, his expression thoughtful. Being a pastry chef sounds incredibly creative and challenging. Not everyone has the skill or dedication to succeed in that field. Try telling my mother that. She still introduces me as Amanda, who works with food, like I'm manning a drive-through window at a fast food chain. Family dynamics can be complicated. That's a diplomatic way of saying my family is dysfunctional. What about you? I asked, eager to shift focus. What do you do that landed you an invitation to this event? I work in sustainable architecture and green building consultation. My firm helps businesses and developers create environmentally responsible buildings. Boring technical stuff that makes most people's eyes glaze over at parties. That doesn't sound boring at all. It sounds important, thanks. Most people just want to know if I can get them a discount on solar panels. He smiled, but there was something guarded in his expression. I was supposed to be here with my business partner, Marcus. He's the one who actually knows the groom through some professional connection. But he got hit with the flu last week, and I got voluntold to represent our firm. So we're both wedding crashers in our own way. Survivors of inadequate seating arrangements. At least, we talked through the entire cocktail hour, and I found myself genuinely relaxing for the first time all day. Cameron was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed real interest rather than polite small talk. He wanted to know about my favorite desserts to create, the challenges of working in a professional kitchen at 4 a.m., why I'd chosen pastry over other culinary paths. I asked him about sustainable architecture, about the satisfaction of creating buildings that minimized environmental impact, about the frustrations of dealing with clients who wanted green credentials but weren't willing to invest in actual sustainability. He spoke passionately about his work, about creating structures that could serve communities for generations while treading lightly on the earth. I found myself captivated by his enthusiasm, by the way his eyes lit up when he discussed passive solar design and reclaimed materials. "You really believe in what you do?" I observed. "Is that surprising? Most people at my sister's wedding seem more interested in appearing successful than actually being passionate about anything." Cameron's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. "You notice a lot for someone who was seated behind a curtain. When you're invisible, you learn to watch people. It's amazing what you see when no one knows you're looking." A server approached to announce that dinner was being served in the main ballroom. Guests began flowing toward the entrance, and Cameron stood offering his hand. "Ready to see if your dinner seating is any better?" It wasn't. The reception hall was magnificent, decorated with what must have been tens of thousands of dollars worth of flowers, candles, and dramatic uplighting. Long tables were arranged in a U shape, with the head table elevated on a platform where Isabel and Preston would sit with their wedding party. Place cards directed guests to assigned seats. I found my name at a table in the far back corner, positioned so that I'd need to crane my neck at an uncomfortable angle to see the head table. The chairs around me were mostly empty. Apparently, I'd been seated with the overflow guests, the people who had to be invited but didn't quite fit anywhere else. Cameron appeared at my elbow, his own place card in hand. Interesting. I'm at the complete opposite end of the room. Almost like someone wanted to make sure the unimportant guests were spread out so we wouldn't cluster and make the seating chart look unbalanced. This is ridiculous. The words came out sharper than I intended, frustration finally breaking through my careful composure. I'm her sister, her only sibling, and she's treating me like I'm some distant acquaintance she felt obligated to invite. You know what? Cameron plucked my place card from the table and pocketed it along with his own. Screw the seating chart. Come on, what are you doing? Improvising. Just follow my lead and pretend you're here with me. Before I could protest, he guided me toward a table much closer to the head table, one clearly designated for important guests. He pulled out a chair for me, his hand warm and reassuring on my back as I sat, then settled into the seat beside me with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. Cameron, we can't just... We can. And we did. If anyone asks, there was a mix-up with the seating assignments and we're fixing it ourselves. Trust me. The table filled quickly with guests who clearly knew each other. Preston's professional colleagues, I gathered from their conversation. They worked in healthcare management and spoke in acronyms and industry jargon I didn't understand. They greeted Cameron with familiarity, calling him by name, and he responded with easy confidence that suggested he knew exactly who they were. A woman named Jennifer, who introduced herself as the Director of Strategic Planning at Cascade Medical Group, smiled warmly at me. And you must be Cameron's girlfriend. He's been keeping you a secret. I opened my mouth to correct her, but Cameron smoothly interjected. Amanda prefers to stay out of the spotlight. She's not one for corporate events usually, but she made an exception for this wedding. How sweet. And how do you know the bride and groom? Amanda is Isabel's sister, actually. Jennifer's eyebrows lifted in surprise. Oh, I had no idea Isabel had a sister. She never mentioned it during any of our planning meetings. Her smile faltered as she seemed to realize how that sounded. I mean, I'm sure it just never came up in conversation. I'm sure, I replied, keeping my voice carefully neutral even as the comment stung like a physical blow. My sister had worked closely enough with Preston's colleagues to coordinate wedding details, and she'd never once mentioned having a sister. Dinner was served in elaborate courses. Seared scallops gave way to a mixed green salad with candied walnuts, then a choice of herb-crusted lamb or pan-seared salmon. The food was exceptional, but I barely tasted it. I was too aware of Cameron beside me, of the way he played his role as my date with convincing ease. His hand occasionally touched my shoulder or arm in small gestures that looked casual but felt intentional. He included me in conversations, deferred to my opinions, made me feel visible in a way I hadn't felt since arriving. Between courses, Preston's father stood to give a speech. He talked about his son's accomplishments, about how proud he was to welcome Isabel into their family, about the bright future ahead for the young couple. He mentioned how Isabel had brought sophistication and grace into Preston's life, how she was exactly the kind of woman he'd always hoped his son would find. My mother stood next. Her speech was shorter but equally effusive. She spoke about Isabel's childhood achievements, about her daughter's determination and elegance, about how she'd always known Isabel would accomplish great things. She talked about the wedding planning process, mother-daughter spa days and cake tastings and venue shopping, all the precious moments they'd shared. She didn't mention me once, not even in passing, not even to acknowledge that Isabel had a sibling. It was as if I'd been digitally erased from the family history. I felt Cameron's hand find mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gesture of quiet support. I squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. Then came the best man's speech, full of jokes about Preston's bachelor days and heartfelt sentiments about finding true love. The maid of honor followed with stories about Isabel's perfectionism and her romantic dreams, about how she'd always wanted a fairy tale wedding. I waited, hoping someone, anyone, would mention me, would acknowledge my existence in even the most minimal way. But speech after speech passed and my name never came up. I was the ghost at this celebration, present but unseen. Dessert was served, an elaborate 4-tier creation of vanilla bean cake with raspberry filling and white chocolate buttercream. It looked stunning but lacked depth of flavor. The buttercream was too sweet, the cake layer slightly dry. As a professional, I couldn't help but critique it, and Cameron noticed my expression. Not up to your standards? It's beautiful, but beauty isn't everything. The execution is off. The buttercream is masking the raspberry instead of complementing it, and the texture is too dense. The vanilla is artificial, not real bean. Could you do better? In my sleep. The words came out more confident than I felt, but they were true. I might be the family disappointment in every other area, but in the kitchen, I knew my worth. I believe you, Cameron said simply. After dessert, the reception transitioned into dancing. Isabel and Preston took the floor for their first dance, swaying together under perfect lighting, while a live band played a romantic ballad. They looked like something from a bridal magazine, the perfect couple having their perfect moment. My father cut in for the father-daughter dance. I watched them move together, remembering when he used to spin me around our living room when I was small, before the divorce, before everything fell apart. Did Isabel remember those times? Did she ever think about the family we used to be? Cameron stood and offered his hand. Dance with me. You don't have to keep playing the attentive date. I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, I'm a terrible dancer and I need someone to step on who won't complain. I let him lead me onto the dance floor. He wasn't terrible at all. He was quite good, actually, leading with confidence while maintaining a respectful distance. We swayed to the music and I found myself relaxing into the rhythm, into the moment. Thank you, I said quietly, for tonight. For sitting with me. For the whole fake date thing. You didn't have to do any of this. Maybe I wanted to. You're interesting, Amanda. More interesting than anyone else at this wedding? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're talented and underappreciated. I know you see through the superficial nonsense that most people accept without question. I know you're hurt, but you're trying not to show it, and that takes real strength. His words hit something deep inside me, a place I'd been protecting all evening. My eyes burned with unshed tears, and I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry at my sister's wedding. The song ended and transitioned into something more upbeat. Other couples joined the dance floor, and Cameron guided us to the edge, away from the crowd. I need some air, I admitted. Let's go outside. We slipped out of the ballroom onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. The November evening air was crisp and welcome after the warmth of the crowded reception. String lights twinkled in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere that felt at odds with the turmoil inside me. I shouldn't have come, I said, leaning against the terrace railing. I knew it would be like this, but some part of me hoped it would be different. That maybe Isabel would remember we're sisters. That maybe she'd want me here for real, not just to check a box on her obligation list. Cameron stood beside me, his shoulder touching mine. Family can be the most complicated relationships we have. We're bound to them by blood and history, but that doesn't guarantee love or respect or even basic consideration. You sound like you're speaking from experience. My father and I haven't spoken in 4 years. He had very specific plans for my life. Join his law firm, follow in his footsteps, become a partner. When I chose architecture instead, he made it clear I was no longer the son he wanted. So yes, I understand what it feels like to be a disappointment. I turned to look at him, seeing new layers in his expression. I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly painful. It was. It still is sometimes. But I learned something important from it. The people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are still people with their own limitations and prejudices and failures. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. Is that what tonight is? You choosing to be kind to a stranger? Maybe it started that way. But you're not a stranger anymore, Amanda. And this isn't just kindness. There was something in his voice, something that made my heart beat faster. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened and a group of laughing guests spilled out. The moment broke and Cameron stepped back slightly. We should probably go back inside. I think they're about to cut the cake. The cake-cutting ceremony was everything I expected. More photos, more speeches, more perfectly choreographed moments. Isabel fed Preston a small bite with delicate precision, and he returned the gesture with equal care. No smashed cake in faces, nothing undignified. Perfect control, as always. As servers distributed slices of wedding cake, I noticed my mother making her way through the crowd, stopping to chat with various guests. She was in her element, basking in the reflected glory of her daughter's successful wedding. When her gaze finally landed on me, surprise flickered across her features, followed quickly by disapproval. She approached our table with measured steps, her smile tightening. Amanda, I didn't expect to see you sitting here. This table was reserved for Preston's executive team. There was a seating mix-up, Cameron said smoothly before I could respond. I'm Cameron Sullivan, one of Preston's sustainability consultants. Amanda and I are here together. My mother's gaze swept over Cameron, taking in his expensive suit and confident demeanor. I could practically see her recalculating, reassessing my presence based on the caliber of my companion. I see. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Cameron. I'm Diane, Isabel's mother. She emphasized the words as if to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. I wasn't aware Amanda was seeing anyone. We've been keeping things quiet, Cameron replied, his hand finding mine on the table. Amanda is quite private about her personal life. Yes, she is. Diane's smile didn't reach her eyes. Amanda, dear, I hope you're enjoying the wedding. Isabel worked so hard to make everything perfect. It's beautiful, I said, forcing the words out. She is. Preston is exactly the kind of man I always hoped she'd marry. Successful, established, from a good family. Everything a mother could want for her daughter. The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. Unlike you, who works in a bakery and lives alone and has nothing to show for your life, Cameron's grip on my hand tightened slightly, a silent show of support. Amanda was just telling me about her work as a pastry chef, he said. It sounds incredibly demanding. Not everyone has the talent or discipline to succeed in that competitive field. Diane's expression flickered with annoyance at having her implied criticism deflected. Yes, well, we all have our different paths. I should get back to the other guests. Do try to enjoy yourself, Amanda, she swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and maternal disappointment. That was unpleasant, Cameron observed once she was out of earshot. That was my mother on a good day. The evening wore on. The band played. People danced. Drinks flowed freely. Isabel and Preston made their rounds, thanking guests and accepting congratulations. I watched them work the room with practiced efficiency, noting how they spent more time with some guests than others, carefully maintaining the hierarchy of importance. They reached our table eventually, Preston leading with a practiced smile. Up close, I could see he was handsome in a conventional way, the kind of features that photographed well but lacked character. His handshake was firm but perfunctory when Cameron introduced himself. Then Isabel's eyes landed on me, and something complex passed across her face. Surprise, definitely. Discomfort, perhaps. She'd probably forgotten I was even here, tucked away in my assigned corner where I couldn't interfere with her perfect day. Amanda, you look lovely, she said, her voice carrying that careful politeness people use with acquaintances they don't quite remember. Thank you. The wedding is beautiful, Isabel. Congratulations. I'm so glad you could make it. And I see you've met some of Preston's colleagues. Her gaze slid to Cameron with curiosity. I don't believe we've been introduced. Cameron Sullivan. I work with Preston on sustainability initiatives for Cascade Medical Group, and I have the pleasure of being Amanda's date this evening." Isabel's eyes widened slightly. This was clearly news to her. "Oh, I didn't realize you were seeing anyone, Amanda." "How wonderful." The way she said it, with that slight emphasis on wonderful, suggested she found it more surprising than wonderful, as if she couldn't quite believe someone like Cameron would be interested in someone like me. "We've been dating for a few months," Cameron continued, his arm sliding around my waist in a gesture that looked natural and possessive. "Amanda is remarkable. I count myself lucky she tolerates my workaholic tendencies." "How nice," Isabel said, though her smile had frozen slightly. "Well, we should continue making our rounds. So many people to thank. But let's catch up properly soon, Amanda. I feel like we haven't really talked in forever." They moved on, and I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That was surreal. "She seemed surprised to see you looking happy." Isabel isn't used to me having anything she might consider valuable, including a handsome date who impresses her new in-laws. "So you think I'm handsome?" Cameron's eyes danced with amusement. "Don't let it go to your head. You're objectively attractive. It's not a personal observation." "Of course not. Purely objective." Around 10 p.m., the wedding coordinator announced that the bride and groom would be leaving shortly. Guests were invited to line up outside with sparklers for the send-off. I debated skipping this part, but Cameron convinced me to participate. "You came this far. Might as well see it through to the end." We stood in line as sparklers were distributed, and when Isabel and Preston emerged from the venue, we held our sparkling lights high along with everyone else. They ran through the corridor of light, laughing and waving, before climbing into a luxury car that would take them to their honeymoon suite. As the car pulled away, taillights disappearing into the night, I felt a strange sense of finality. The wedding was over. Isabel had gotten her perfect day, her perfect marriage, her perfect life. And I had stood witness to it all from my position on the margins, exactly where she wanted me. Guests began dispersing, some heading to their rooms at the resort, others moving toward the parking lot. Cameron and I lingered on the steps, neither of us quite ready to acknowledge that the evening was ending. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asked. "I'm actually staying at the resort tonight. Room 418. I figured it would be easier than driving back to Portland this late." "What about you?" "Same. Room 523. My partner had already booked the room before he got sick, so it seemed wasteful not to use it." We walked slowly through the gardens, following the illuminated path back toward the main resort building. The night air had cooled considerably, and I shivered slightly in my thin dress. Cameron immediately shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders, a gesture so classic and unexpected that I almost laughed. "You don't have to do that. Humor me. I was raised with old-fashioned manners, and my mother would haunt me if I let you freeze." His jacket was warm and smelled like expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. I pulled it closer, grateful for both the warmth and the excuse to keep something of his with me a little longer. "Thank you," I said, "for everything tonight. You turned what could have been a miserable evening into something almost bearable." "Just bearable? I'll have to work on my fake dating skills." "Okay, better than bearable. Surprisingly pleasant in parts." "That's more like it." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Amanda, I know tonight started as a strategic alliance between two wedding outcasts, but I want you to know it became more than that for me. You're genuinely interesting, funny, talented, and far too good for people who can't see your worth." His words wrapped around something fragile inside me, something I'd been protecting for too long. "Cameron, I know we just met. I know this is strange timing, but..." I paused, gathering courage. "I'd like to see you again. After tonight. After this wedding. In the real world where we're just two people without assigned seating charts and family drama." "I was hoping you'd say that." His smile was genuine and relieved. "Have breakfast with me tomorrow. The resort has a decent restaurant, and we can talk without tuxedos and wedding stress. What do you say?" "Breakfast sounds good. 9 o'clock. I'll meet you in the lobby." We'd reached the entrance to the resort. The lobby beyond was quiet, most guests having already retired to their rooms. This was the moment where the evening would officially end, where we'd go our separate ways, and I'd be alone with the weight of everything I'd witnessed and endured. Cameron seemed reluctant to leave too. He stood close, his hand still holding mine, his eyes searching my face as if trying to memorize it. "Good night, Amanda. I'm glad I crashed your sister's wedding. I'm glad you did too. Good night, Cameron." He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. I didn't want. His lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle and questioning and somehow exactly right. It lasted only a moment before he pulled back, his thumb brushing my cheek. Then he was walking away toward the elevators, and I was standing alone in the lobby, wearing his jacket and touching my lips and wondering what exactly had just happened. I made my way to my room in a daze. The space was nice, decorated in neutral tones with a view of the gardens. I hung Cameron's jacket carefully in the closet, changed into my pajamas, and collapsed onto the bed. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabel. "Thanks for coming tonight. It meant a lot to have you there." I stared at the message for a long moment. It meant a lot? Really? Was that why she'd relegated me to the worst seat? Why she'd never mentioned having a sister? Why she'd looked surprised to find me at a decent table during the reception? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on something non-committal. "Congratulations again." "The wedding was beautiful." She responded immediately. "We should definitely get together when I'm back from the honeymoon. I want to hear all about your new boyfriend. He seems very successful." Of course. That's what she'd taken away from the evening. Not that I'd been there supporting her. Not that we'd barely spoken all night. But that I'd shown up with an impressive date. That was the only thing that made me visible to her. I didn't respond. Instead, I set my phone aside and stared at the ceiling, processing the emotional whiplash of the entire day. I'd come to this wedding expecting to feel like an outsider, and I'd been proven right in the worst ways. But I'd also met Cameron, had those hours of feeling seen and valued, and now I had breakfast to look forward to in the morning. Sleep came slowly, my mind replaying moments from the evening. Isabel's perfect smile, my mother's dismissive comments, Cameron's hand in mine, the sparklers lighting up the night sky. Tomorrow, I'd go home to Portland, back to my apartment and my job and my regular life. But something had shifted tonight. Some fundamental understanding about my place in my family and my own worth. I woke around 8 a.m. to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the previous day came flooding back, bringing with it a complicated mix of emotions I wasn't quite ready to face. I showered and dressed carefully in jeans and a soft cashmere sweater, trying to look effortlessly pretty without seeming like I was trying too hard. The irony wasn't lost on me. After spending an entire wedding being invisible, I was now worried about making a good impression on a man I'd just met. Cameron was waiting in the lobby at exactly 9 a.m., looking refreshed in dark jeans and a forest green Henley that made his gray eyes even more striking. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine expression that made my stomach flutter. "Good morning. You look beautiful." "You look pretty good yourself." Is that my line, though? Aren't men supposed to be the ones getting compliments on their appearance? I believe in equal opportunity compliments. Come on. I heard they make excellent waffles here. The restaurant was moderately busy with other hotel guests, but we found a quiet table by the window overlooking the lake. Morning light sparkled on the water, and the whole scene felt peaceful in a way yesterday's festivities hadn't. Over breakfast, Cameron's promised waffles and my eggs Benedict, we talked more freely than we had at the wedding. Cameron told me about his work, about a particularly challenging project he was managing with a hospital resistant to implementing green building practices. I told him about the bakery, about my boss Marcus who was brilliant but temperamental, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and delicious that brought joy to people. "You light up when you talk about baking," Cameron observed, cutting into his waffle. "It's obvious you love what you do." "I do. It's the one area of my life where I feel completely confident. No second guessing, no wondering if I'm good enough. I know I'm good at what I do. Then why do you let your family make you feel otherwise?" The question was direct, almost confrontational, but his tone remained gentle. I set down my fork, considering how to answer. Because they're my family. Because some part of me still wants their approval, even though I know I'll never get it. Not the way Isabel gets it anyway. What if you stopped wanting their approval? What if you decided your opinion of yourself mattered more than theirs? Easier said than done when you've spent your whole life being compared to someone and coming up short. Cameron reached across the table, his hand covering mine. For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary. And I don't say that lightly. We finished breakfast and walked outside into the crisp November morning. Other guests were checking out, loading luggage into cars, heading back to their regular lives. I should probably get on the road soon, I said reluctantly. I have work tomorrow, and I need to prep some things this afternoon. Before you go, can I ask you something? Cameron's expression turned serious. Of course. Last night, watching how your family treated you, seeing how they've made you feel small and unimportant, it made me angry. Not just sympathetic, but genuinely angry on your behalf. That's kind of you, but I'm not finished. What if there was a way to change the narrative? To make them see you differently? To give you back some of the power they've been taking from you all these years? I studied his face, trying to understand where this was going. What do you mean? I mean, what if we continued this? Not fake dating, but real dating. What if we spent time together, built something genuine, and along the way showed your family that you're not the disappointment they've painted you as? Cameron, I'm not going to use you to make my family jealous. That's not fair to you. You wouldn't be using me. I'm offering because I want to see you again regardless. But I also want to help you if I can. Think about it. Your sister just married a healthcare executive, right? Well, I happen to be someone her new husband's organization needs. Someone who could make things very interesting for them. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the morning air. What are you saying exactly? Cameron's expression shifted, becoming more calculating than I'd seen before. I'm saying that Preston's organization, Cascade Medical Group, has been in talks with my firm about a major sustainability initiative. It's a multi-million-dollar project that would significantly improve their environmental impact and public image. I'm one of the lead consultants on the proposal. And you'd use that as leverage somehow? Not leverage exactly. Just an opportunity to remind them that people they overlook might be more important than they realize. Your family, especially Isabel, seems very invested in status and success. What if you suddenly had access to that world through me? What if they had to see you differently? I should have said no, should have thanked him for the thought, but explained that revenge wasn't my style, that I was above such pettiness. But standing there in the morning light, remembering every slight and dismissal from the night before, something darker whispered that maybe I deserved a little vindication. This feels manipulative, I said slowly. Is it more manipulative than seating you behind a curtain at your own sister's wedding? Than never mentioning you have a sister to colleagues she worked with? Than your mother pretending you don't exist in her speeches? Cameron's voice was passionate now. Sometimes the people who hurt us need to be shown consequences. Not cruelty, just consequences. What would this actually look like? I'm not going to sabotage anyone's business or career. I'm not that person. Nothing like that. I'm talking about visibility, about making sure you're present and acknowledged at future family events. About your sister and mother realizing that dismissing you means potentially damaging relationships that matter to Preston's career. About you finally getting the respect you deserve, even if it starts from a place of obligation rather than genuine affection. It was twisted logic, and I knew it. But it was also seductive. How many years had I spent being invisible? How many family gatherings had I endured being treated as lesser? The thought of Isabel being forced to acknowledge me, to include me, to treat me like I mattered, it was intoxicating. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. But Amanda, whether you agree to any of this or not, I meant what I said about wanting to see you again. That part is real. No manipulation involved. We exchanged phone numbers before parting. Cameron kissed me goodbye. Another gentle kiss that made my heart race. And then I was driving back to Portland with my thoughts in turmoil. The next week passed in a blur of work and confusion. Cameron texted me daily, casual messages about his day that gradually built into longer conversations. We talked about everything and nothing: books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, childhood memories that shaped us. He never pushed about his proposition, never brought up Isabel or revenge or any of it. He just talked to me like I was someone worth knowing. On Friday, he called. "I have a business dinner next Thursday in Portland. A potential client I'm trying to woo. Would you want to join me? Fair warning, it might be boring corporate talk, but I'd love your company. Are you sure? I don't know anything about sustainable architecture." "That's exactly why I want you there. You'll keep me honest. Keep the conversation from disappearing completely into jargon. Plus, the restaurant is supposed to have an incredible pastry program. I thought you might enjoy some professional reconnaissance." I laughed despite myself. "You're bribing me with professional reconnaissance. Is it working?" "Yes, what's the dress code?" Thursday arrived faster than I expected. I left work early to prepare, changing into a black sheath dress that was elegant without being flashy. Cameron picked me up at 7, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the wine list requires a sommelier to navigate. Cameron's client was already there, a middle-aged woman named Jennifer whom I recognized from Isabel's wedding. She'd been at our table, one of Preston's colleagues from Cascade Medical Group. Her eyes widened with recognition when she saw me. "Amanda, what a lovely surprise. I didn't realize you and Cameron were still together." "Still together and going strong," Cameron said smoothly, his hand warm on my back. "Amanda has been patient with my crazy work schedule." We sat, and I tried to fade into the background as Cameron and Jennifer discussed the sustainability project. But Jennifer kept pulling me into the conversation, asking about my work, expressing genuine interest in the bakery. "That sounds fascinating," she said. "I have such respect for people who work with their hands, who create tangible things. My job is all spreadsheets and conference calls. Sometimes I miss making something real." Dinner progressed pleasantly, and when dessert arrived, a deconstructed apple tart with salted caramel, I couldn't help offering my professional opinion. The components are technically excellent, but they're fighting each other rather than creating harmony. The caramel is too aggressive, overwhelming the apple instead of complementing it. And the pastry could be more delicate. Jennifer leaned forward with interest. "Could you fix it? If you were making this, what would you change?" I found myself explaining the balance of flavors, the importance of letting each element shine without dominating. Cameron watched me with something like pride, and Jennifer listened intently, asking follow-up questions that showed genuine engagement. "You know," Jennifer said as coffee was served, "we're planning a major corporate event in February. A celebration for the successful completion of our sustainability project, assuming Cameron's team delivers everything they've promised, of course." She smiled at him. "We haven't settled on a caterer yet. Would your bakery be interested in handling the desserts?" I blinked, caught off guard. "We're a small operation. I'm not sure we'd have the capacity for a large corporate event." Let me rephrase. "Would you personally be interested in creating desserts for the event? We could work around your schedule, and I'm authorized to offer very competitive compensation." Cameron squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. "Amanda's work is exceptional," he said. "You'd be lucky to have her." "I'd need to talk to my boss, make sure it wouldn't conflict with bakery commitments," I said carefully. "But yes, I'd be interested in discussing it further." Jennifer smiled warmly. "Excellent. I'll have my assistant reach out to you next week with details. And Cameron, excellent taste in girlfriend. She's delightful." After dinner, Cameron drove me home. I was quiet, processing what had just happened. At my apartment building, he parked and turned to face me. "That was quite an evening," he said. "Did you plan that? The dessert conversation, Jennifer offering me that job?" "I didn't plan anything. I told Jennifer we were having dinner and mentioned you were a pastry chef. The rest was all her genuine interest. And your talent speaking for itself. But you knew she might offer me something. Hoped she might see that you're incredibly skilled at what You do and deserve opportunities to showcase that talent. Is that so wrong? I studied his face in the dim light from the street lamp. I can't tell if you're genuinely trying to help me or if this is all part of some elaborate revenge plot. Can it be both? I care about you, Amanda. That's real. But I also think the people who've dismissed you should be forced to reckon with your worth. Not through sabotage or cruelty, just through reality. Through them having to acknowledge your talent and value because it affects things they care about. This is complicated. The best things usually are. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. For what it's worth, I'm falling for you. That complicates things too, but I'm not sorry about it. My breath caught. Cameron, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Now go inside before I do something impulsive like kiss you senseless in front of your building. I got out of the car but leaned back through the window. I'm falling for you too, just so you know. His smile could have lit up the entire city. Good. That makes what comes next easier. What comes next? Patience. You'll see. The following week, Jennifer's assistant called with details about the corporate event. It would be in mid-February, celebrating the completion of Cascade Medical Group's transition to sustainable practices. They wanted an elaborate dessert spread for 250 guests, and they were offering 3 times my usual rate. I discussed it with Marcus, my boss, who was thrilled at the prospect of the exposure and the money. We worked out an arrangement where I'd use the bakery kitchen during off hours. The bakery would get credited as a partner, and I'd receive the bulk of the payment. Cameron and I fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Dinners, movies, long walks through Portland's neighborhoods, conversations that stretched late into the night. He was easy to be with, making me laugh and challenging me to think differently about things. The physical attraction was undeniable, but what surprised me was how much I enjoyed simply being around him. We didn't talk much about Isabel or my family during those weeks. It was like we'd created a bubble where that drama didn't exist, where I could just be myself without the weight of family expectations. Then, 8 weeks after the wedding, Isabel called. Amanda, hi? Sorry I haven't been in touch since the honeymoon. Things have been crazy with settling into married life and renovating the new house. No worries. How was the trip? Incredible. Bali was everything we hoped for and more. Listen, I wanted to see if you were free for lunch this Saturday. I feel like we haven't really talked in forever, and I want to catch up properly. I almost said no out of habit, but then I thought about Cameron's words about visibility and respect. Sure, I can do lunch. Where did you have in mind? We met at an upscale bistro in the Pearl District, not far from my apartment. Isabel looked tanned and relaxed, the picture of newlywed bliss. Her hair was highlighted, her nails freshly manicured, her outfit casually expensive. We ordered salads and made small talk about the honeymoon, about her new house in Lake Oswego, about Preston's recent promotion at work. Then, so tell me about Cameron. You two seemed quite close at the wedding, but you never mentioned you were seeing anyone. It's relatively new. We met a few months ago through work connections. He seems very successful. Preston's colleagues were all impressed by him. Apparently his firm is handling a massive project for Cascade Medical. There it was. The real reason for this lunch. Not sisterly bonding, but fishing for information about someone who mattered to her husband's career. Cameron's very good at what he does, I said neutrally. I'm just surprised you never mentioned him before. I mean, I told you all about Preston when we started dating. Had she, though? I remembered stilted phone calls where she'd mentioned having a boyfriend but provided few details. But pointing that out would only create conflict, and I was curious to see where this was heading. I tend to keep my personal life private. Well, I'm glad you're happy. And I heard you're doing the desserts for the Cascade Medical event in February. That's wonderful. Preston mentioned Jennifer was very impressed with you. It's a good opportunity. Isabel stirred her salad absently. Listen, I wanted to apologize if things felt weird at the wedding. I know the seating arrangement wasn't ideal, and I feel bad that we didn't get much time to talk. The seating arrangement put me behind a curtain, Isabel. It wasn't just not ideal, it was humiliating. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was the wedding planner's mistake. She didn't understand family dynamics. And by the time I saw the setup, it was too late to change things without causing chaos. You could have mentioned having a sister to Preston's colleagues. To anyone, but you didn't. That's not fair. Of course people know I have a sister. Jennifer didn't. She was surprised at the wedding when Cameron mentioned it. She said you'd never brought it up during all your planning meetings. Isabel's face flushed. I don't talk about my personal life at work. That doesn't mean I'm hiding you. Doesn't it, though? When was the last time you invited me to anything? When did you last call just to talk? Not because you needed something or had an obligation. Amanda, you're being dramatic. We're sisters. Of course we have a relationship, do we? Because from where I'm sitting, we have a biological connection and not much else. You treat me like an afterthought, like someone you have to include out of duty but would rather forget. Isabel set down her fork, her composure cracking slightly. Is that really what you think? That I don't care about you? I think you care about me the way you care about distant cousins. Present at major events, but not really part of your life. And honestly, I've accepted that. What bothers me is the pretense. Don't invite me to lunch and act like we're close when we both know we're not. Fine. You want honesty? I'll give you honesty. Isabel's voice dropped, sharp and cold. You made choices that embarrassed Mother. You chose a career path that she couldn't brag about to her friends. You refused to conform to the expectations we grew up with. And yes, that created distance between us. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. Her words confirmed what I'd always suspected but never heard spoken aloud. I wasn't the disappointment because I'd failed. I was the disappointment because I'd refused to compete on their terms. Thank you for finally being honest, I said quietly. But here's some honesty back. I'm not embarrassed by my choices. I love what I do and I'm good at it. If that's not enough for you or Mother, that's your problem, not mine. And I'm done apologizing for being myself. I stood, placing enough cash on the table to cover my meal. Thanks for lunch, Isabel. And congratulations again on your marriage. I hope it brings you everything you're looking for. I left before she could respond, my hands shaking as I walked to my car. The conversation had been brutal but necessary. Something inside me had shifted. Some fundamental refusal to keep accepting crumbs of affection from people who saw me as lesser. Cameron called that evening. I told him about the lunch, about Isabel's admission, about how I'd finally stood up for myself. I'm proud of you, he said. That took real courage. It felt good. Terrifying, but good. Like I finally said things that needed saying. Are you ready for the next step? What next step? The Cascade Medical event is in 6 weeks. I want you there as my date, not just as the pastry chef. I want you visible and acknowledged and impossible to dismiss. Are you ready for that? I thought about Isabel's face during our lunch, about my mother's dismissive comments at the wedding, about all the years of being treated as less than. Yes, I'm ready. The 6 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. I worked obsessively on the dessert menu, creating elegant individual portions that would be both beautiful and delicious. Chocolate espresso tarts with gold leaf, Meyer lemon panna cotta with edible flowers, miniature red velvet cakes with cream cheese mousse, salted caramel macarons that melted on the tongue, pistachio financiers with rose water glaze. Each piece was a work of art, proof of my skill and dedication. Cameron helped where he could, taste-testing components and offering honest feedback. Our relationship had deepened during this time, moving from the exciting uncertainty of new romance into something more solid and real. I was in love with him, though I hadn't said the words aloud. I suspected he felt the same. The night of the event arrived. It was being held at an elegant event space in downtown Portland, all exposed brick and industrial chic lighting. I'd spent the afternoon setting up the dessert display, arranging each piece on tiered stands with strategic lighting to highlight the artistry. I changed into a stunning emerald dress Cameron had insisted on buying me, telling me I needed to look as impressive as my desserts. My hair was styled in an elegant updo, my makeup flawless. When Cameron saw me, his expression made every minute of preparation worthwhile. "You're breathtaking," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The event was already in full swing when we made our entrance. 250 guests mingled throughout the space. Healthcare executives, city officials, business leaders. I spotted Preston and Isabel across the room, deep in conversation with a group of colleagues. My mother was there too, looking elegant in a pearl gray cocktail dress. Jennifer spotted us immediately and rushed over. "Amanda! The desserts are absolutely stunning. Everyone is already talking about them. You've outdone yourself. Thank you. I'm glad they meet expectations. Meet them? You've exceeded them by miles. Come, I want to introduce you to some people." The next hour was surreal. Jennifer pulled me from group to group, introducing me as the talented pastry chef responsible for the incredible desserts. People complimented my work, asked about my training, requested business cards. I was visible in a way I'd never been at family events, acknowledged for my actual skills rather than dismissed for my choices. Cameron stayed close, his presence both supportive and strategic. He made sure to mention our relationship to everyone we spoke with, positioning me not just as the chef, but as his partner. In this world that valued connections and status, being Cameron's girlfriend carried weight. I watched Isabel notice us from across the room. Saw her expression shift from confusion to recognition to something that looked like discomfort. She said something to Preston, and they both looked our way. "They've spotted us," Cameron murmured in my ear. "Ready for what?" "To remind them you exist." Before I could respond, Preston was approaching with Isabel beside him. Up close, he looked strained, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Cameron. Amanda. Good to see you both." "Amanda, I've heard nothing but praise for your desserts tonight. Very impressive work. Thank you." "I'm pleased they've been well received." Isabel stood slightly behind Preston, her expression carefully neutral. "Hi, Amanda. Everything looks beautiful." "Thank you, Isabel." An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Preston broke it. "Cameron, I was hoping we could discuss the final phase of the sustainability project. There are some budget considerations we need to address." "Of course." "Amanda, would you excuse me for a few minutes?" I nodded, and the two men moved away, leaving me alone with Isabel. The moment felt heavy with unspoken words. "You've been busy," Isabel said finally. "Landing major catering jobs, dating important consultants. Quite a change from the last time we talked. I've always been busy. You just never noticed. That's not fair, isn't it? You spent years dismissing what I do as insignificant. Now that it's benefiting your husband's business connections, suddenly it matters." Isabel's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "What do you want from me, Amanda? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry I didn't appreciate your career choices. I'm sorry the wedding seating was bad. I'm sorry we're not closer. Is that what you need to hear? I don't need anything from you anymore. That's what you don't understand. I'm not the little sister begging for scraps of approval. I've built a life I'm proud of, with people who value me for who I actually am. People like Cameron, you mean? Preston says he's very influential in his field. Very useful to know. The implication stung even though I'd expected it. You think I'm using him? Or that he's using me? That's the only way you can understand this, isn't it? As a transaction. I'm just saying it's convenient. You show up at my wedding alone and invisible, and now suddenly you're dating someone Preston's company depends on and getting hired for major events. It's quite a transformation. Before I could respond, Cameron returned with Preston. Both men looked tense. "Isabel, we should mingle with the other guests," Preston said, his tone brooking no argument. "There are several board members here we need to speak with." Isabel shot me one last, unreadable look before allowing Preston to guide her. Away. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "That looked intense," Cameron observed. "Are you okay? She thinks I'm using you to gain status. Or that you're using me to influence Preston's business decisions. She can't conceive of us just genuinely caring about each other." "Does her opinion matter to you?" I thought about it honestly. Not as much as it would have a few months ago. I'm done needing her approval. Good, because you're about to get something better than approval. What do you mean? Cameron smiled, that calculating expression I'd seen before. Watch. Jennifer approached the microphone set up near the dessert display. The room quieted as she began to speak about the successful sustainability project, thanking Cameron's team for their excellent work. Then she pivoted to discussing the event itself. I also want to recognize someone who made tonight extra special. Amanda, could you join me up here? My heart hammered as I made my way to the front. Jennifer smiled warmly and continued. Amanda created every single dessert you've enjoyed tonight. Her artistry and skill transformed our celebration into something truly memorable. But more than that, she represents exactly the kind of innovation and dedication we're trying to foster at Cascade Medical Group, which is why I'm pleased to announce that we'll be partnering with her for all of our major events going forward. Amanda, thank you for your incredible work. The room erupted in applause. I stood there, stunned, as Jennifer handed me an envelope containing the contract we'd apparently just entered into. My eyes found Cameron in the crowd, saw his proud smile, and understood that he'd orchestrated this moment perfectly. Then I found Isabel. She stood next to Preston, clapping along with everyone else, but her expression was complex. Surprise, certainly. Discomfort, maybe. Even a hint of respect she'd never shown before. Our mother stood beside them, looking equally shocked. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention in a room that included my family. And it was because of my own merit, my own skills, my own worth. Not because I'd married well or achieved conventional success, but because I'd excelled at something I loved. The applause faded, and I returned to Cameron's side. He pulled me close, kissing my temple. How does it feel? He whispered. Like vindication. Like finally being seen. You were always worth seeing. They were just too blind to notice. The evening continued, but everything had shifted. People sought me out specifically now, not as Cameron's girlfriend or Isabel's sister, but as Amanda, the talented pastry chef with a bright future. My mother approached eventually, her smile tight but present. Congratulations, dear. That was quite an announcement. Thank you, Mother. I suppose your career choice has worked out after all. It wasn't an apology. Wasn't an acknowledgement of years of dismissal. But it was something. A grudging recognition that perhaps I'd known what I was doing all along. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Cascade Medical Partnership led to other opportunities. Other high-profile events that showcased my work. A feature in Portland Monthly magazine. Inquiries from wedding planners and event coordinators across the Pacific Northwest, Cameron, and I moved in together into a beautiful loft in the Pearl District with enough space for me to have a proper home kitchen. Our relationship deepened into something permanent and real. We talked about the future, about marriage and children, and building a life that honored both our ambitions. Isabel and I reached a cautious detente. We weren't close, probably never would be. But there was mutual respect now, grudging though it might be. She'd learned that dismissing me came with consequences, that I had value beyond her narrow definition of success. Our interactions remained formal but cordial. Family gatherings were no longer the painful exercises in invisibility they'd once been. I could hold my head high, knowing I'd earned my place through my own merit. My mother struggled more with the adjustment. She'd built her identity around Isabel's achievements, and having to acknowledge mine upset her carefully maintained hierarchy. But even she couldn't ignore the reality of my success, the respect I'd earned in my field, the life I'd built on my own terms. As for Isabel and Preston, the consequences of her treatment of me became increasingly apparent over time. Preston's reliance on Cameron's firm for sustainability consulting meant that Isabel could never fully dismiss me. Without potentially damaging her husband's professional relationships, she'd backed herself into a corner of forced civility. She had to include me in family events, had to acknowledge my presence because doing otherwise might reflect poorly on Preston. The healthcare industry in Portland was smaller than people realized, and word traveled fast about how executives' families conducted themselves. Isabel, who had always been so careful about maintaining the perfect image, now had to ensure that image included being a supportive sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd spent years making me invisible, and now she was trapped in a situation where she had to make me visible. Had to sing my praises to her husband's colleagues. Had to pretend we'd always been close. Every family gathering became a performance where she couldn't afford to slip, couldn't afford to show the disdain she'd once displayed so freely. Her perfect life now required my presence, and that requirement would follow her for as long as Preston's career depended on maintaining good relationships with Cameron's firm. She'd constructed her own cage, one where she'd forever be reminded that the sister she'd dismissed had become someone she couldn't afford to ignore. 1 year after the wedding, Cameron proposed. We were at Cannon Beach on a foggy October morning, walking along the shore near Haystack Rock. The beach was nearly empty, just us and the gulls and the sound of waves crashing against the sand. He didn't get down on one knee. We'd talked about proposals before, and I'd told him I'd prefer something more organic, less theatrical. Instead, he stopped walking, took both my hands in his, and simply asked, "Amanda, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me where we both get to be exactly who we are, where we support each other's dreams, where we create our own definition of success?" The ring was beautiful, a vintage sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds, something unique and meaningful rather than conventionally flashy. "Yes," I said, my voice catching with emotion. "Yes, absolutely yes." We kissed on that foggy beach, and when we pulled apart, Cameron's eyes were bright with tears that matched my own. "I have a confession," he said. "That night at your sister's wedding, when I sat down next to you behind that curtain, it wasn't entirely random." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I'd seen you arrive earlier. I was standing near the entrance when you walked in, and you looked so determined and so sad all at once. Then I saw where they'd seated you, behind that curtain, and I thought, who does that to someone? So I asked the coordinator to reseat me. I wanted to meet the person they were treating so badly." "You asked to be seated there?" "I did. I told them I had a bad knee and needed to be near an exit." He smiled sheepishly. "Complete lie. But I wanted to meet you. And then when I actually talked to you, when I saw how talented and funny and genuine you were, I knew I wanted more than just one evening." I laughed, tears streaming down my face now. "So this whole thing from the very beginning was me choosing you," he finished. "Before I even knew your name, I chose you. And I'd make that same choice every single day for the rest of my life." We were married 6 months later, in a small ceremony at a botanical garden in Portland. 50 guests, our closest friends, Cameron's mother and siblings, a few relatives on both sides. I invited Isabel and Preston. I invited my mother. I invited my father and his new wife. Not because I needed them there, but because I wanted them to see me as I truly was. Happy, successful, loved, worthy. Isabel came. She even seemed genuinely happy for me, though there was something wistful in her expression during the ceremony. My mother came too, dressed elegantly and behaving graciously, though I caught her studying Cameron throughout the evening as if trying to figure out what equation had led to my unexpected success. My father walked me down the aisle. It was awkward at first. We'd barely spoken in years, but when he placed my hand in Cameron's, he whispered, "I'm proud of you, Amanda." I should have said that years ago. It wasn't enough to heal everything, but it was something. The reception was held in the garden's conservatory. And yes, I made our wedding cake myself, a 4-tier masterpiece of vanilla bean cake with blackberry filling and honey buttercream, decorated with fresh flowers and gold leaf. It was everything the cake at Isabel's wedding should have been. Perfectly balanced flavors, ideal texture, artistry that served the taste rather than overwhelming it. When we cut the cake, Cameron fed me a bite with such tenderness that I heard several guests sigh. Then I fed him a bite and he closed his eyes in exaggerated ecstasy. "This," he announced to the room, "is the best cake in the entire world. And I'm not just saying that because I married the woman who made it." Everyone laughed. And in that moment, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. Jennifer from Cascade Medical was there with her husband. She pulled me aside during the reception. "I'm so happy for you, Amanda. You deserve all of this." She paused, then added quietly, I want you to know, that first night at your sister's wedding, when Cameron introduced you, I could tell something was off. The way your family treated you? It bothered me. So when Cameron mentioned you were a pastry chef, I made it my personal mission to find a way to work with you. Not because of him, but because I could see your family was overlooking something special. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. That means more than you know. Women need to support each other, she said simply. Especially when our own families don't. 2 years after our wedding, Cameron and I opened our own business together. Sustainable Sweets, a bakery designed with environmental responsibility at its core. Cameron handled the building design and operations, creating a space that used solar power, composting, and locally sourced ingredients. I handled the baking and menu design. It was a risk, leaving the security of my job at Sweet Haven, investing our savings into something uncertain. But it was also the most rewarding thing I'd ever done. The bakery became successful beyond our wildest expectations. We were featured in Sunset Magazine, Northwest Travel and Life, even a segment on a national morning show about sustainable food businesses. Isabel came to the grand opening. She walked through the space, taking in the reclaimed wood counters, the living wall of herbs, the display cases filled with my creations. This is really impressive. Amanda, she said, and for once she sounded like she meant it. You've built something special here. Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but I love it. She hesitated, then, I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the half-hearted thing I said at that lunch 2 years ago. I waited, giving her space to continue. I was jealous of you, she said finally. Growing up, you were always so confident in yourself, so sure of who you were. You didn't care what other people thought. I cared desperately, and I resented that you didn't. So I tried to make you small because I felt small. And I'm sorry. You deserved better from me. You deserved better from all of us. It was the apology I'd waited years to hear. And now that it had arrived, I found I didn't need it as much as I once had. I'd built a life I loved without her approval. But still, it mattered. Thank you for saying that, I said. It means something. Can we try? She asked. To have an actual relationship? I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to try. I thought about it for a moment. About all the years of hurt and dismissal. About the wedding where I'd sat behind a curtain. About the lunch where she'd finally been honest about why she'd kept me at arm's length. But I also thought about growth and change and the possibility of something different. We can try, I said. But it has to be real, Isabel. No more performing for other people. No more pretending. No more pretending, she agreed. It wasn't perfect after that. Relationships rarely are, especially ones damaged by years of neglect and resentment. But we started having lunch once a month. Real conversations where we talked about our actual lives rather than maintaining careful facades. We still had our tensions, our moments of falling back into old patterns. But there was effort now, on both sides, and that made all the difference. My mother remained my mother, difficult, demanding, never quite satisfied, but even she couldn't deny the success I'd built. She started bringing her friends to the bakery, showing it off as if she'd supported me all along. I let her have that fiction. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the life Cameron and I had created together. The bakery that brought joy to our community. The home we'd made, filled with laughter and love and the smell of vanilla and butter. The possibility of children in our future. The certainty that we'd built something real and lasting. 3 years after that wedding where I'd sat behind a curtain, I ran into the wedding coordinator at a coffee shop in Lake Oswego. She recognized me immediately. Amanda, I've been following your bakery on Instagram. It's absolutely beautiful. You've done so well for yourself. Thank you. I've been fortunate. She hesitated, then. I wanted to apologize. For your sister's wedding. That seating arrangement was wrong, and I knew it at the time. But the bride, Was very specific about where she wanted you, and I didn't push back like I should have. I've thought about it many times since then. It wasn't professional of me, and it wasn't kind. Another apology I no longer needed but appreciated nonetheless. It's okay, I said. Actually, if you hadn't seated me there, I never would have met my husband. He specifically asked to be moved to that section so he could meet me. Her eyes widened. Really? Really? So in a strange way, that terrible seating assignment led to the best thing that ever happened to me. She laughed, shaking her head. I guess everything happens for a reason? I don't know about that, I said. But I do know that sometimes the worst moments lead us exactly where we need to be. Looking back now, 5 years after that wedding, I can barely recognize the woman. I was when I sat behind that curtain, feeling invisible and worthless. Cameron had offered me more than protection at a difficult event. He'd offered me a mirror that reflected my true worth, a partnership that elevated rather than diminished, and the courage to demand the respect I'd always deserved. The revenge, if that's what it was, hadn't been about cruelty or destruction. It had been about finally, definitively proving that I mattered. Not because of who I married or how I compared to my sister, but because of who I was and what I could create. Standing in my bakery now, watching customers enjoy pastries I've made, with my own hands, working alongside the man I love who believed in me before I fully believed in myself, I realized that the best revenge was never about making my family see me. It was about seeing myself clearly, my worth, my talent, my value, and building a life that reflected that truth. They can watch now, from their carefully constructed worlds of appearances and expectations. They can watch as I create beauty and joy and success on my own terms. They can watch as I thrive in ways they never imagined possible, and I no longer need them to acknowledge it. Their approval or disapproval has become irrelevant, like background noise I've learned to tune out completely, because I've found something far more valuable than their recognition. I've found myself, and in finding myself, I've found everything else I needed: love, purpose, success, happiness, peace. The woman sitting behind that curtain 5 years ago deserved better than she got that day. But she survived it. She grew from it. And she became someone who no longer needs to sit in the shadows waiting to be noticed. She creates her own light now, and it's brilliant.